Hey guys, so last time we gave you some basic cultural vocab. Today we're going to look more into terms that have to do with cultural bias. So if you're taking notes, it'd be a good idea to add a second heading with the title Cultural Bias Vocab. If you need to do that right now, pause the video because I'm going to keep going for everybody else. So if these terms are all about cultural bias, it's important to know what is cultural bias. Cultural bias can be a lot of things, but put simply, it's judging another culture through the lens of your culture. And that's presuming that your culture knows what's right and wrong, and that concept is universal to all other cultures, and they should have your values and norms. And if they don't have the same values and norms, they're backwards or wrong. That's known as cultural bias, being biased towards your own culture. This is also known as ethnocentrism. An excellent example of this is this political cartoon. On the left, we have kind of a stereotypical representation of a Western woman being free with her body, in basically a bikini and sunglasses. And then on the right, we have a stereotypical representation of a Muslim woman wearing a full burqa, where she's covered everything but her eyes. And so the Western woman is thinking everything's covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. And then the Muslim woman in this cartoon is thinking nothing's covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. They're both thinking that the other person is being oppressed and dominated by other men in their culture. And maybe they are, but they're each looking at it through the standards and norms and values of their culture. Maybe neither of them are oppressed. Maybe they have power. And our other term that we're going to be learning today is cultural relativism. And that's that right and wrong can vary by culture. So we should try to understand cultures through their own norms and values, not ours. And these pictures are a couple examples of that. Think about what in our culture we think is really right and really wrong. And while thinking about really wrong, you probably didn't think eating meat was really, really wrong. Some people do, but meat is a staple of the mainstream American diet. Where other cultures, they might think eating meat is horrible and you're eating souls of animals and all sorts of different things. And so you can see a concept of right and wrong can differ between cultures. Another example is spanking and disciplining your kids physically. Just a few decades ago, this was very common practice in our country. And now, some people still practice it, but it's a lot less common and it's a lot more looked down upon. And so even within a culture, over time, you can see a shift in norms and values. And when we look at people in the culture, we need to try to understand them through their norms and values and not just apply ours to it. Now, that doesn't mean you excuse anything, right? If someone's religion says that they can kill everyone in the world, that doesn't mean we should just let them do that. But it's important to try to notice their lens and see the world through their lens before we make any decisions, before we make any evaluations or judgments. And so we can connect those two concepts to those 6 themes that we talked about last time, right? Your location, where you grew up, often has a huge effect on what you believe is right and wrong. In terms of perspective, you have those different concepts of cultural relativism, different ideas of what's right and what's wrong. In terms of movement, cultures can clash when people migrate to a different place. Think about in America, where we have all sorts of people coming from all around the world, and they're bringing their culture with them. And sometimes it meshes nicely, and other times there's moments of clashing. Think about power. Which cultural norms are dominant? Who gets to say what is right and what's wrong in a particular area? When cultures end up colliding, what norms win out? In terms of human-environment interaction, different cultures have very different relationships with the environment, whether that's animals or plants, the air. And finally, membership. Different communities have different norms and values. That's where we get the different cultures from around the world. So we can see, just like any lesson we do, we can connect those 2 terms to the 6 themes that we're seeing over and over again in our class. So, document your knowledge and then head back to class. Let me know if you have any questions.